Welcome back, my friends, to the Dime Store Cinema, where we talk movies and culture. Today, I'm going to talk about the 2019 movie, The Wave. Now, I found this movie on accident while I was scrolling through Prime because I was sick all weekend. So, this was a sick time viewing, and might have contributed to some of the opinions I came across with this one. Now, what interested me in this is it marketed itself as somewhat psychological, and also it's starring Justin Long. I've always kind of had a soft spot for Justin Long. He's not in a whole lot of particularly good movies, but he was in Drag Me to Hell and he was in Accepted. I really liked the way that he portrayed a podcaster in Tusk, so I've always kind of had a soft spot for him. So I decided I wanted to give it a view. So I'm gonna kind of break this down into two separate things. So I want to kind of talk about the movie itself and the merits as a movie, and then I kind of want to talk a little bit about the cultural commentary associated with it, and it's more or less a point of view that more and more people, I believe, are taking as people are moving further and further away from a religious worldview and instead adopting an open-minded, quasi-spiritual, quasi-gnostic, simulation theory view of the universe. This is a view very much propagated by celebrity figures like Joe Rogan and some others. So we'll talk about that part second. First, I just want to talk a little bit about the movie. Now, I will say the cinematography in this was quite good. There are some issues with some CGI. There's a little spotty, but this is a low to mid-range budget movie, so it wasn't terrible. The cinematography itself, though, was quite good. The use of colors was very engaging if you're into that kind of palette. It's something of that modern palette, something you'd see in like Color from Space and movies like that. So this movie was directed by Guile Claben. Now, from what I can see, this was the first feature-length film that he has done. He previously had done music videos, a documentary, and some shorts. So for a first-time feature-length film, this was fairly competently made. I can definitely see the music video influence. There's a lot of surrealism. There's a lot of rapid editing. There's quite a bit of that kind of thing, which you see a lot in music videos. So I can definitely see where that influence is coming from. But I don't want that to sound as if he doesn't have his own vision, or he's just relying on tropes that you see in music videos. The movie did seem to have at least a little bit of its own vision, its own voice. So I don't want that to seem like a negative towards the movie. Now, one of the things that made it somewhat interesting is and this is something that you can see in Moon Knight. So this idea of cutting past the action and seeing the aftermath. There was a good bit of this. Now, this came out in 2019, so this predates Moon Knight. But as far as something recent to reference, it was very similar to that same kind of idea. Now, I'm not particularly happy with how they tied that into him hitting a clock to rip himself out of time and either go forward or backward, and it was a little haphazard. This, of course, is explained in the movie as just being the universe helping him to get to the point where he needs to be in order to be on the right path, as it were. So a little convenient, which isn't necessarily compelling. However, I think it was done in an interesting enough way that it didn't necessarily detract too much from the movie. I didn't finish this movie being bored or hating it. So these are just little things that I noticed that maybe a stronger filmmaker or a stronger screenwriter would have a better grasp on storytelling and narrative, and making it a little bit more about the protagonist's journey as opposed to just being taken along for the ride. However, being taken along for the ride, as the title suggests, the wave, you're going to ride that wave. So it's following this theme that we'll kind of get into when I talk about the more broad cultural critique. So essentially, this story follows this lawyer who is just about to get a promotion. He goes out with his friend to celebrate because he and his fiance are not really seeing eye to eye on some financial things and other things like that. So he decides to go out on this night on the town. Starts out innocent enough. He's at a bar. They start having drinks. His friend has some girls come over. They start chatting with the girls. How that goes. One of them says that they're getting bored, and so they want to go to a party. They go to the party, and at the party, just along, and one of the other female characters go into a back room and meet this gentleman who is providing drugs to them. And they take this experimental drug, and that experimental drug causes Justin Long to essentially jump through time to the next morning. And that starts the chaos. And from then on, it's just him chasing down his wallet and the girl that he was with and the drug that was used and the drug dealer. And it ends out that his entire bank account is emptied out. And then it turns out that the drug dealer who was supplying drugs at the party was not the drug dealer that he met. He ends up jumping through time with the actual drug dealer's drugs. So the rest of the movie is then him trying to get the money to pay for the drugs that he accidentally stole and took through time and space, only to then jump back in time to give all of his finances to a homeless gentleman that he had met the night before, to then bring to that apartment at that time to save himself and his friends from being killed by the drug dealer for stealing the money, or the drugs rather. So this going back and forth is all ties into one another, and it all culminates with him being led by the universe, this idea of karma, this idea of things balancing out. His promotion is predicated on him denying an insurance claim from a gentleman who had to stop taking his medication because it prevented him from being able to work. And since that was going against his doctor's advice, that was enough grounds for them to deny the insurance claim. So this whole movie is predicated on the universe bringing him to a state whereby his evil action towards that family could then be rectified and the universe can be balanced again. This, of course, is rectified by him signing over his insurance policy to the family that was impacted by this decision. The drugs that he inadvertently stole from the drug dealer being placed in his boss's car trunk, and his drunk boss hitting him with the car. So the family that he wronged received his insurance money. His evil boss is going to be arrested, both for vehicular manslaughter and also for having a bag full of illicit drugs. And he gets to pass on to whatever the cosmic karmic balance is in the universe. So that's the story, and it's interesting. It weaves in and out. Some of the ideas are really good. How they connected the timelines, they did a good job. I thought of kind of wrapping it up. So overall, as far as the movie goes, the visuals, the story, it was an entertaining watch. It was fun. I didn't mind it. So yeah, I mean, as far as just a good movie to watch, it was fine for just, an evening watch. Like I said, I watched it while I was sick in bed, and it was perfectly fine. So if you're into that kind of movie, dealing with kind of more spiritual, cosmic, karmic kind of things, and drug use, and the idea of opening your mind and behaving in accordance with your morals, and doing what's right, and that kind of stuff, that kind of theme put within kind of a psychological, psychedelic kind of framework in the film, you would enjoy this. So it's more serious than a lot of drugs movies are, but there are some comedic elements in it. So it kind of touches on multiple genres, and is kind of indie and weird enough that it can kind of resonate with the people who are more into that. And I think those kind of people who are into more that kind of thing, things like Color Out of Space, although not in the horror genre and not that kind of Lovecraftian cosmic horror, more so in that vein, but in a more psychological and spiritual kind of vein. So substitute the horror with more kind of almost sci-fi, psychedelic, acid trip type movie. So that's kind of what I think it was going for. And like I said, for a first-time filmmaker, first-time full-length filmmaker, it was fairly competently done. Nothing that I would really sing the praises of, but since I have seen it, I haven't heard anyone talk about it, and I think that it was an above-average film. It was decent, fun to watch. So that's my rating on the movie side of things. Now I want to talk a little bit kind of on the philosophy and the cultural impact of what this movie is kind of going for. So as I mentioned, there's this idea of this cosmic and karmic justice and balancing. And this idea that the universe itself balances itself out. This is a somewhat popular belief these days. I think I had mentioned at the beginning, as people move somewhat away from organized religions, Christianity in particular in the West, because it's been the biggest influence. People are finding new things to latch onto, new ideas, or technically they're not new. These are very old ideas, but new to them ideas of having an opening your mind and being subject to the universe. These are, and then of course the idea of having special knowledge, which is very Gnostic, which comes from early Christianity and predates that in some ways. It was hijacked by some people deemed heretics in the early church, and that of course depends on which side you believe, but that's kind of the history of that. Interestingly enough, when they were deemed heretics by the Eastern Church, they kind of went into other parts of Asia and influenced Buddhism and different things like that. Whereas Buddhism already existed, the influence of certain aspects of enlightenment was impacted by some of the Gnostic thought. That's neither here nor there, just a fun little tidbit of history. So what's interesting about this to me, this idea of opening your mind, the problem that I have with opening your mind is that when you open your mind, you're allowing knowledge to come in. You're opening yourself up to be influenced, essentially, which can be very good for learning, for education. You're opening yourself up to information, both internally and externally, trying to get to the bottom of something. Now, that's all well and good, particularly when you're trying to learn something, when you're trying to get down to the bottom of something, when you're trying to determine the validity and the accuracy of things. It can be good to open yourself up, make yourself available to varying opinions and information. The problem is, once you open yourself up and you learn and you gain the information and you go through as much information as you can, both internally and externally, at that point, what you do is important. At that point, you can't remain open, because then you have no direction. And if you have no direction, then there's no way that you can apply the things you've learned. So wisdom, so knowledge is essentially an opening up. Knowledge is opening yourself up towards information. Wisdom is then narrowing yourself back down. Wisdom is taking all of the knowledge that you have learned and discerning the most valuable and efficient path. So this idea of merely opening yourself up to the universe and allowing the universe to guide you is only half of the journey. You could say the hero's journey, or just the human journey. It's only half of the journey. Yes, there needs to be a type of opening to where you're available to learn new things and to hear and contemplate varying opinions and ideas. That's the opening. Once you do that, though, there needs to be, as I mentioned, a narrowing, and that's where wisdom comes in. So this idea of opening yourself up to the universe, well, the universe is a very big and complex thing, very difficult for us to fully understand. So all we can really do is take the information that we can and try to make the best decisions we can using that information. So there's that expanse and the narrowing, That's the journey. It's the ebb and flow of what we do through life. And if any one of those things takes over, then we stagnate. We stagnate either at the expanse or we stagnate at the narrow. There needs to be the ebb and flow. That's what's dynamic about being human. That's what's dynamic about your life. Your ideas should always be in flux. Now there should always be an underlying moral and ethic, certain things that you're not going to turn your back on because they're very base level, but there always is tweaking of nuance as you learn more. This is true with your relationship with your wife or your parents or your kids. There's always this tweaking of nuance as you get to know them better, as you start to learn them as they change, as you change, and then of course your ideas towards things as you start learning more about things. Your ideas change. So that's that ebb and flow. That's the dynamism of being human. What makes living interesting. So there's that aspect of it that mentality tends to bother me about many of the people who hold this cosmic and karmic balance idea. because they're not so much interested in balance as they are as just being open all the time. And that may not be true for everyone, but for many of the people that I hear holding this idea, that tends to be kind of the mindset. And this moves on to the second aspect of it, is this idea of drugs leading to that openness. And this, one of the most impactful statements I've ever heard, and I don't remember who it was originally attributed to, but a phrase that I live by for the last probably 1.5 to 2 years is, beware of unearned wisdom. I hear, and I have heard many people talk about experiences on drugs, how they've opened them up to new horizons, how they've opened them up to a spiritual plane, how they've gotten them to quit smoking and other things like that, which I admit is great. Anything, because I know that can be a hard habit to kick for some people. I was one of the very few fortunate people that I know of who was able to quit cold turkey. But I know that it can be a really difficult journey for people. So to hear that there are those kind of benefits, but speaking more of just the intellectual and the spiritual mindset of things, these people who say that they've experienced these transformations and the opening of their mind that comes from drugs. Every time I hear them tell these stories, that saying just is repeating in my mind, beware unearned wisdom. You're taking a substance that's getting you to a point that can take, that does take people years and even decades of very strict spiritual discipline to reach, and you're just reaching it in an afternoon by taking a drug. And I'm not speaking any one way or the other on this. I've never done drugs. It's never been my thing. I've never been interested in it. For some people, that might just be part of what they need to get that last step. I'm not speaking towards that, and I'm not saying anything negative towards that choice. What I am saying, though, is those things that you are learning from those experiences, you need to think of them in light of yourself, in light of, is this earned wisdom? Have I earned this wisdom, or have I just received this wisdom? If you have just received this wisdom, then I urge you to spend a great deal of time reflecting on yourself and reflecting on your own mental and physical and spiritual discipline before you jump to any conclusions about what these experiences are or mean. It's very easy to have an experience and then define your life based on the experience. That's no way to make good, wise, or rational decisions about things. The wise decision comes from the process of reaching that decision. That is to say, there needs to be a weighing out of the present and future consequences of what we do, what we say, how we act. So these immediate experiences, they can be life-altering. They can be, from people's own testimonies. They can say this, but it needs to be understood and weighed and thought about and prayed about and meditated upon of what it means for you, and why it does impact your choices, your personhood, your personality. So, it goes back to that idea of being open for too long without then narrowing down to make wise decisions. It can be detrimental. And it goes back to this movie, which is relying on being open and receiving this substance, which then opens the character up to karma, personified in a sense. But that character hasn't earned that revelation, and you can see through the chaos of the movie that unearned revelation causes chaos. It's a perfect representation of what often happens, is this unearned insight leads him on a wild, chaotic romp through time and space, trying to get things lined up just well enough for others to thrive, ending and culminating in tragedy, in your own personal tragedy. And when you're constantly open and only open, then more often than not, that tends to be the case, because you have no actual path. So everything is chaotic. Everything is a whim. Everything is just coming up with a whim of fancy, trying to connect things that either do or don't connect to come up with an outcome that is hopefully more beneficial than detrimental. So that's more or less what I want to say about that. We need to be very wary of unearned wisdom, of unearned knowledge, of just jumping into things and leaving ourselves open without then once again focusing in on wisdom. And of course, there are topics in this movie about ethics and morality. What little it deals with in ethics and morality, because it seems to be more focused on karma than ethics and morality. It's the same complaint that, right or wrong, it's that same complaint that most movies tend to have when dealing with this topic of the evil business versus the downtrodden little guy. Once again, trying to obfuscate the responsibility. So trying to indicate that responsibility only lies with the powerful and not with the not powerful. But one thing that I have said in the past is, benevolence cannot exist without a certain sense of tyranny. So, if we, as those without power, make bad decisions, but then rely on the benevolence of those that we have given power, then we're essentially giving them a tyrannical reign over us. So it's incumbent on those with power to be moral people, but it's also incumbent on those without power to also be moral people, to behave ethically and morally. So I think that too often there's just a poo-pooing on those with power, and read that as you will, either financially speaking. In this case, it's financially speaking, because we're talking about a law firm representing an insurance company, basically coming up with legal ways that they can deny coverage, which, granted, can be completely devastating for people, and a lot of times, particularly with the way lawyers think, they're able to weasel the way out of things unjustly. So don't get me wrong, that exists, that's evil. But it's still that idea that is so often propagated in Hollywood, where it's only those with wealth, only those with power who are responsible for their actions, whereas everyone needs to be responsible for their actions. None of us should put ourselves in a situation where we have to be beholden on someone else's benevolence. Now that's obviously there's some give and take to that, because everyone needs help in some way. But just in general, we should strive to make good decisions. And once again, that's that whole idea of not leaving yourself wide open or not narrowing yourself too much. It's that ebb and flow of gaining knowledge and then using that knowledge to make better decisions. All of that comes into play with being, if you ever get to that point where you're financially powerful, or if you're always going to be financially essentially destitute. Either way, there are consequences for actions, and all of us should behave within our own spheres in an ethical and moral fashion. So, just try to think of that balance. They're talking about cosmic balance all the time. Well, that goes both ways. Cosmic balance, if you want to look at that way, karma. I don't believe in karma. I believe in cause and effect. And I believe that cause and effect can be altered from a particular path by the kindness of people. And that can cause a completely new path. So, let's do what we can to be better to one another. And that can steer things. There's a economic principle that also exists in nature. And it's the Pareto principle, or the 80-20 rule, where essentially 20%, and we'll just use people in this instance, but it's also true in nature and also in finances. 20% of people do 80% of the work. So it doesn't take a lot of us if we're all working together to make something better. If we're all working together to be better towards one another. It doesn't take a lot of us in the grand scheme of things to actually impact pretty significant change. So it's one of the reasons why I'll never be completely hopeless about the way things are. I know things are tough for a lot of people right now, but it doesn't take a lot of people in the grand scheme of things. It only takes between 10 and 20% of people, mathematically speaking, to really affect a significant change. And I'll keep that in mind, because it doesn't take a lot of people to then affect things in a negative way. So if you're one who's really wanting to work towards the good, then you need to bust your butt. We all need to bust our butt. We need to be that 20% towards the good and overbalance those working towards ill. So just something to keep in mind. Don't lose hope, because it doesn't take a lot of people to positively impact the world. Thank you once again, my friends, for joining me. This has been Justin C. Bartlett with the Dime Store Cinema, reminding us all to fill our lives with good beverages and amazing stories. Thank you for the likes, thank you for the comments, and thank you for the subscribes.